Lots of focus on the Democrats this week, but we do still have a few Republicans, you know. Good evening. Welcome to My State of Mind. I am Dan Yorke. Tonight, my guest is Brian Newberry. He's the state representative who is minority leader. That means he's one of the very few Republicans that battle away at the State House. I actually spoke with him yesterday afternoon, so when we go to that segment, I'll have a different shirt on. Yesterday's shirt. Anyway, Brian and I had a conversation in two segments after the recording of the Dan Hurley interview yesterday, which I hope you enjoyed. We've got a lot to do and very little time to do it on the rundown tonight, so let's get to it because I've got to make a time deadline here. This is kind of cute, everybody says. I don't think it's so cute. Got to be patient in the fair city of Cranston. We have a big speech you may have heard about. It's called that tonight by the president, and this is a very, very sensitive conversation about the famed broadcaster and baseball player. Let's get to it. Let's hustle along here. I am Michelle Kwan's husband. Yeah. The Clay Pell for governor campaign is up and running. Here's the headline in the Boston.com web section today. Okay, this is all over America. Michelle, can we throw that up again, Kev? Thanks. Michelle Kwan's husband to run for Rhode Island governor. I want you to read that carefully. Michelle Kwan's husband to run for Rhode Island governor. And Michelle Kwan's husband confirmed today that he is Michelle Kwan's husband at his big kickoff at the convention center.
Well, hello, everybody. I'm Michelle Kwan's husband.
That's it. Sorry for that little glitch. It happens sometimes in live television, but you know, I was there and I was watching this whole thing, and I was kind of just conflicted by the big timedness of the event in the rotunda, 5th floor of the convention center, and the clumsiness of it at the same time. You know, I know that people laugh over this. I'm Michelle Kwan's husband, but I'm not laughing. It was kind of weird. This is actually my iPhone video as the candidate and his wife come walking in. You know, he was silently whispering, "Wow," to everybody. He is, and that's Grandma. That's Noella Pell, and she's terrific at 89 years of age. He walks into this big crowd and does his thing. Look, here are my thoughts on this candidacy. I've been telling you that I'm a little tired of the media's pushing on this so much for so long, but he's in now, right? He's in now. The one thing you have to understand is so far, labor is all over him. They were all over this announcement today. And that's not a bad thing necessarily. I mean, labor has a right to lobby and pick candidates and work for them. And they will work very hard on the ground for Clay Pell. So he's for real that way. He says he's not going to take any PAC money or special interest money or lobbyist money. He doesn't have to. Just write the check. So he's got that resolved. But while he speaks very softly, and we'll talk more about that as we go, and has kind of a Mr. Rogers-ish type of attitude, the bottom line here is he hasn't offered any vision either, other than he loves the place. Wink, you know, he hasn't been around, but he loves the place. And he's got a few short ideas that really don't have any legs at this point. So, you know, I'm looking forward to asking him a bunch of questions and treating him like a real candidate. But this is a real candidacy, and somewhere along the line, he's going to have to stop laughing about being Michelle Kwan's husband. Next item. Yeah, this whole ticket blitz situation in Cranston has got people antsy. They want answers. They're not getting any answers quite yet. Here's the headline: State Police ticketing probe to take several weeks. And I understand that. Kelly Sullivan actually filed a report for Eyewitness News. Here's a small excerpt of what she filed last night.
While Council Vice President Michael Farina doesn't believe Mayor Fung had any involvement, state police will continue its investigation into who did. But Colonel Stephen O'Donnell wants city residents to know, despite the controversy, their police officers are continuing to work hard every day.
They need a break from this banter, so to speak, the public forum. Let the case go its course, let it be investigated, let it be assessed, and there'll be time to debate if the assessment's correct or if the IA is correct.
You know, the colonel is making a legitimate comment there. What he's saying, acting like a cop's cop, is, listen, there's good police work going on in Cranston despite all that's swirling around it. But just understand this, he says that, but the truth is that Alan Fung waiting so long to call the state police in, and then in the middle of this ticket blitz controversy, popping or moving the current police chief has confused everything. Alan Fung was upset that he was called to the council last night to answer some questions, charging them with bad politics. It's bad management, Alan. This too will pass. Perhaps you'll learn a lesson in leadership. All right, speaking of leadership, the State of the Union, the president tonight, here's this headline. I think this is really provocative. He's going to hike minimum wage for federal contractors, meaning he's going to bypass Congress. Small excerpt from Fox News.
In advance of tonight's big speech, the White House just announced that the president will, in fact, sign an executive order to raise the minimum wage for federal contractors to $10.10 per hour. But to expand that to the rest of the private sector, he will still need help from Congress.
Congress, the body that legislates this kind of stuff. What's the new legacy? Obamacare's not working for you, Mr. President. Now it's going to be I do what I want when I want to do it. And the minimum wage, your legacy? We'll watch carefully tonight and have thoughts tomorrow. And finally, Jerry Remy is going back to the broadcast booth. The headline in the Boston papers today, self-explanatory. We'll talk more about this over the course of the week or so. It's a very sensitive matter, and there are arguments on both sides. But Jerry says, look, I've been sitting around doing nothing, and I have to get back to work. Sometimes, just for consideration, what's important to you is not necessarily what's the right thing to do. No final verdict from me yet. I need more time, but because I've got a lengthy interview that is scheduled here, I must pause. So we'll come back with the minority leader of the State House. Stay with us. Welcome back to My State of Mind. We are going to bring on State Representative Brian Newberry, who's the minority leader of the House here. First, I just want to show you who the leader of the House is. This is the guy that runs the show, and he's always on my mind because I think in many ways it's a crime that he's there. And I mean that. He's a nice enough gentleman, no doubt, Gordon Fox, but I don't know, man. Let's come on back to me. Brian Newberry, welcome to the broadcast.
Oh, thanks, Dan. Thanks for having me.
Nice to have you. We'll talk about the challenges of the Republicans, which are perennial in every cycle to try to move the new thing. By the way, is moving the ball forward. We're moving forward. That's as opposed to hey, I could have had a V8. We should have been moving backwards.
Well, slogans are slogans. Yeah.
Listen, I'm confused. I'm confused over the Republican position on Gordon Fox. Why haven't the Republicans at least stood on their head and said, this guy should not have been returned to the Speaker of the House after leading a blind vote in June 2010 on the 38 Studios thing?
The problem when you are as small as we are is that we can't actually affect that election. As long as the Democrats support him as Speaker, they're going to support him.
Sure.
And we have to work with the Speaker, whoever it is, on a lot of things that go on behind the scenes. And so, coming out and taking pot shots and antagonizing people is actually counterproductive. I know the public may not want to hear that, but sometimes you have to. That's politics.
But see, here's the thing. You see, it's not, I'm glad Brian said that because he said it. He's consistent with his answer anytime that this comes up. I'm not a bomb thrower for the sake of it.
No, I know that.
Pot shots pot shots means gratuitous criticism. I've never seen a legislative body in Rhode Island or American history that was led astray, the likes of which it was in June 2010, and then returned its leader. And so I don't know why Republicans just can't stand on their head and say, by the way, this is a joke. You guys shouldn't be doing what you're doing. We can't affect it, but we're embarrassed by what you're doing. There's none of that conversation.
Well, the fact that we did not vote for him, I know that sounds insignificant, but it matters because we would vote for a Democratic Speaker if we supported him. But when his election came up, we didn't support him, and that is what it is. But, someday I deal with Gordon on a daily basis, and there's things that go on. I cannot just simply get into a personal antagonism match with him.
And you show up to his annual fundraiser, as chronicled by the Political Scene in the paper on Monday. Listen, I know it's a fine line between getting along to get something done and creating an entirely antagonistic atmosphere. But I just find this parade of folks who continue to hail to the king to be discouraging because no one wants to have the real internal conversation about what should have happened or what did happen with this whole
Well,
$90 million
I've
problem?
said what I thought would happen at 38 Studios. It's clear to me that most people in that room, I was certainly among them, most people in that room had no idea that was going on behind the scenes.
Right.
And nothing happens in the building without the Speaker and the Senate President having knowledge.
Right.
I've said that before. But what else is there to say about that? To the extent that the Democrats continue to support him, that's
Yeah.
up to them.
Well, the thing that's interesting about it is that to a rep on the Democratic side, they'll tell constituents, "There's nothing much I can do. If you want me to get your thing, I got to be able to work with this guy." And I don't know anywhere else in America, other than in a government setting or perhaps the Rhode Island legislature, where that kind of lay down would occur. Not in a corporate setting. If someone thought that they had been stealthed into a mistake that was worth $90 million prorated against $8.5 billion budget, all hell would break loose in the public sector. I'm sorry, in the private sector. And maybe many other government entities, right? Yes? No?
You're correct. Here's the thing. I don't understand internal Democratic politics. I don't profess to be the expert on that. You have to ask them why they do what they do.
All right. So let's talk about internal Republican politics. Or the politics of running the legislature. So with this, such a small showing that you have, what are your expectations for impacting that which happens in fiscal year 2014?
You raise a very good question. Here's the thing. The Democrats have controlled this state for 70 years. Okay, we've had Republican governors, but all power in this state, as you know, runs through the General Assembly. The Democrats, in my view, have run the state into the ground. Now, I've said that repeatedly, Republicans say it repeatedly, and that's a good argument as to why Democrats should not be elected in this state. It is not, however, an argument for why people should turn to us. The position we're in, we do not have the numbers to do what we'd like to do, but we can tell the public what we want to do if we were put in charge. And so last year we had a staff overhaul on the Republican side. People retired, gave me an opportunity to bring some new people in. And by the way, people don't like to hear that people work for the legislature. But we're a part-time legislature. It's important to have good staff people. We've got good staff people, and I charged them starting at the end of last session, because the beginning of the session it was getting new people on board. I said, look, work with us, work with the members of the Republican caucus, and come up with a legislative plan that we can then present to the public. We know the Democrats are either A, not going to enact it, or B, if they do, they'll just take credit for it. They do that sometimes. And we will roll it out there, and we'll tell people this is what we're going to do. So that's the first part of the answer to your question. What is that plan? It's coming out bit by bit. But what we said is, look, what is the problem that faces this state? The number one problem. And you and I both know what it is. It's the lack of jobs. It's the unemployment rate. It's the fact that our kids can't find jobs. And everyone's kids are looking to leave the state because they can't get employment. How do we fix that? Why is it? We have an unemployment problem because there's a lack of actual private sector employment. Why? Because people do not want to open businesses here. They don't want to move businesses here. They do not want to expand businesses here. Why is that? Because our government makes it oppressive. At the end of the day, that's a very generic.
All right, so hold that thought. Yeah. We'll find out when we come back how you unoppressive it, to coin a word. Stay with us. I misspoke in the last segment. We're actually headed toward fiscal 2015. We're in 2014, and come July 1, it'll be fiscal 2015. Now, there's a lot of things that will happen in the back half of fiscal 2014, the first 6 months of your calendar year. You get that, right? Brian Newberry is the minority leader of the House of Representatives, and has been up there now 3 terms?
It's my third term.
Third term, yeah.
6th year.
So, okay, so you did a nice job alliterating the challenges that the economy and the jobs problem present. At least, what is your proposal?
When we looked at the situation, we said, why is it that the government, in essence, makes it difficult to do business here? There's no one silver bullet solution. One of the things that really offended me about the 38 Studios thing is that even had it been successful, it was still a stupid idea. This idea that we can do this one-shot thing and as I said, a silver bullet and make the state great is not going to happen. It's a lot of little things that need to be done. The Senate last year said moving the needle. That was their thing. I didn't find the contents of that proposal to be particularly inspiring, but the idea was.
Yeah, but the imagery was even way short of where we need to be. Yeah. We don't need to move the needle. We need to blow the place up and/or just give it an enema.
Right, but you don't do that. There's not a single legislative act that can do that. It's a succession of things. For example, why do people not expand or start businesses here? Because the tax burden. It's easy to say that, but what does that mean?
And the regulatory burden.
And the regulatory. Well, I was going to get to that. Okay. But my point is, when you talk about high taxes, everyone says there's high taxes. So what does that mean? Property tax, the governor's right about that. Property taxes are oppressive. Well, why are property taxes oppressive? Well, in part because of what the legislature did a few years back by cutting the aid to cities and towns, forcing the towns to, and the idea was to force the towns to squeeze their budgets out, but the reality is A lot of towns are run pretty efficiently, not all of them.
Well, any pundit that's watching this, or some constituent that really pays attention, will point to Governor Carcieri, a Republican, who actually led that charge to squeeze that local aid.
And he was dead wrong.
Yeah.
He was. Look, you're not going to find me defend Governor Carcieri's economic record at the end of his 2 terms, but he did it. Let's not forget. He wanted to do it, but the Democrats who control the Assembly ultimately did it. It was a combined effort.
No doubt. But there was this feeling that the fat that you could take out of the state budget was also all strewn through the local governments. And I think that we're finding that in part they've had to force themselves to look to each other for support, shared services, shared expenses, but the structures are not actually the same. And so it's harder to take that money out of the local side. Collective bargaining aside, that's part of it. It's hard. Okay, so look, at the beginning of the day, we're not going to talk about the end of the day because we're just starting this season legislatively. But at the beginning of the day, what message do you want to put up there for both goal setting, benchmarking, and Republican ingenuity accountability for the people to recognize what your voice is going to be?
I want to say to the people of Rhode Island that the Rhode Island Republican Party, in particular the legislative members of that party, know that the #1 crisis problem in this state is the lack of jobs for people and their children. And we think we know what to do to make the state better. You know, we're not California. We can turn the state around. That's what frustrates me continually.
And what about the sales tax idea? I know you're saying that there's no one legislative move, but it seems to me one huge monetary fiscal policy change that brings a breath of fresh air, despite the challenge to operational expenses, and that we can then market to the rest of the world is what we need. It's kind of a pick-em, as far as I'm concerned, but something dramatic has got to get done so we can say, we've changed, look at us, come here.
Well, actually, I want to take some credit for the sales tax idea, because last year, I kind of got the ball rolling with my pre-year interview with the Providence Journal. They put it out there, and then Mike Stenhouse and his group picked up on it. I would love to see the sales tax repealed. I think it's a great idea.
At zero?
I'd love to see it go to zero, because you get rid of all the regulatory compliance aspects as well. The problem, as you know, is even though I believe if you eliminated it, I think in the long run you'd make those funds up. You still have to pass a budget year to year. So if you do it all at once, you're going to have a fiscal issue and immediate impact. You know, the first time I was ever on your radio show, we were talking about cutting the budget. This was back in 2008, 9, right after the election. And the reality is, you can't just slice a budget by 10% or 20%, because a lot of those expenditures are locked in. Collective bargaining, leasing, all that stuff. Now you can scale it back over time, and you can do it with a plan, and that's something I'd like to see happen. It's been ratcheted up over time. It's going to have to be ratcheted down over time. So I'd like to see the sales tax eliminated. I'd love to see it eliminated in one fell swoop, but I think if we start reducing it with a plan to reduce it and phase it out, I think that alone would be a huge impact. I'd love to see that happen.
Okay, I saw you on Newsmakers last week, and I think you said some really smart things about this pension situation. Folks, behind closed doors, Judge Sarah Taft Carter has been having her own legislature. The pension reform that these guys purposely voted for under the leadership of Gina Raimondo and others, the governor, come tagging along, is under fire by the lawsuit that you know would happen from labor, but that the judge took it back in the chambers. You're a good lawyer. You know this is outrageous what she is doing. This is a separation of powers argument, the likes of which I've never seen. There's one question that should be answered in the courts, whether this law was constitutional or not. Negotiating the terms of it is outrageous, don't you think?
I've said I find the whole thing very bizarre. And you're right, the judge, any judge, the question before them is a law, any law, is it constitutional or is it not constitutional? And the thing is, at the trial court level, you know it's going to be appealed no matter what the decision is.
Right.
So that decision, in my mind, should have been made a year ago. Or whenever the suit was filed, you get some briefing, you resolve it. And then it goes up to the Supreme Court, whichever side wins or loses below. I don't want to speak for the Democratic leadership, although on that same Newsmakers, you saw Leader Mattiello on there. I don't think there was a dime's worth of difference between what we said on this issue, and I said it would not surprise me if there is a settlement to this, that the legislature will simply ignore it.
I think it has to.
Well, I would put it this way, if I were the speaker, I would ignore it. That's what I would do.
Right, sure. Right. Not only just on the deal itself, but on the constitutionality matter. It's like, if you want to tell us the law was unconstitutional, okay, and the Supreme Court agrees, fine, we'll rework, we'll go back with guidance on what's constitutional, but you cannot do our jobs for us.
Well, the problem, as I said too, is I do construction mediation. That's what I do in my private sector life. I understand mediation. Mediation only works when everybody's at the table that has a stake and can control the result. We, the legislature, aren't at the table anyway, so even if it was a good idea to mediate it, not having us involved makes it a failure.
I'm going to take a little extra time here. The Sakonnet River Bridge is a puzzle to me too. How that we could have a policy that is anybody could see would tear down the economy of Quinnipiac Island is beyond my wildest understanding. But you're thinking that the provinciality of Rhode Island, as small as it is, 50 long and 35 miles wide, might impact whether or not that thing finally is settled, and you don't think there's enough time to get it done?
What I've said is, I think inertia at this point is going to keep those tolls in place. The time to get rid of those tolls was before they went up. In other words, we never should have passed the tolls in the first place.
Right.
However, now that they're in place, and I believe the deadline's April 1st,
Yeah.
if we don't act by April 1st, unless you don't take the Bridge and Turnpike Authority at their word, the tolls are going to go up.
Most
So we
people
need
listening
to
this
act.
go, what do you mean? You have 2 months.
Yeah, well, but my
Right?
point is that it requires the legislature to come up with some kind of solution to the funding issue, which we've had, what, a year, 2 years to do, and I don't see it happening in 2 months. I'd like to see it happen. But what I've also said is, if that funding solution forces people to vote to raise taxes, and you talk about provincialism, but that's part of politics, if your constituents are not directly affected by the toll, even though it affects the state, it's very hard to say, I'm going to raise your taxes to reduce that. And that's why it never should have gone up in the first
We
place.
need to do some big thinking for each other, because a bad economy on the Quinnipiac Island affects
Hurt the whole
your
state. Well, absolutely, I agree.
Good to speak with you. Let's stay in touch over the course of the session, all right?
Good.
Brian Newberry, your state of mind when we come back. Stay with us. Interesting, we recorded that conversation with Brian Newberry yesterday. Since then, this morning, the Speaker of the House was hit with a $1,500 ethics fine. We'll talk about that tomorrow. Your state of mind, talk to me about anything you see here. 228-1886, leave a voicemail, we'll play it. stateofmind@myritv.com is the email. And of course, you can tweet and Facebook post at Dan Yorke Show. Here's a Facebook post of interest. This is in reaction, I believe, to Gina Raimondo's comments about, getting into office first and then looking at the entire tax picture. Has she forgotten she's the treasurer, asks Michael. I guess she really is privy to the books, don't you think? Gina, there she was on Newsmaker saying these things. It's going to be a long road to get some real answers from these candidates, but we'll try every night here on My State of Mind at 7:30. We'll see you tomorrow night on My RITV. Good night.